This episode of the podcast is sponsored by T-Blocks. Are you wanting to expand your wardrobe of geek-related apparel? Do you want a subscription service that actually caters to your interests instead of signing up for a gamble? Well, T-Blocks is a service that will send a shirt straight to your door every month that is specifically tailored to your interests. Tell them what you're into, like DC Comics, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, Rick and Morty, Disney, video games, and you will be sent a t-shirt design based around that every month that is either officially licensed merchandise or created by a talented fan or artist. From $6.99 a month with worldwide shipping, you can even send the shirt back to T-Blocks if it's the wrong size, or if you just don't like the design, they will send you another one. And if you use the coupon code TrilbeeTBX, that's TRILBEETBX at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order, whether it's an order for yourself or a gift for a friend. You'll be getting awesome t-shirts and be supporting my content at the same time. Everybody wins. That's TRILBEETBX at T-Blocks for 10% off your order. Now back to the podcast. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Film Brits podcast. I'm your host Trilbee, the supreme leader of film criticism, and today we're going to be talking about a lot of things. But the past couple of weeks have been kind of all over the place in terms of my own schedule, because myself and my fiance are actually moving out of our current flat and we are moving into a house. I was actually hoping to record this podcast about half an hour ago, but then my internet provider called me up in order to arrange this move and get the internet moved from one property to another. So we're actually moving all of the furniture out of the property tomorrow, which is why I have to get this podcast done, because I will not have a desk in which to podcast from. So that's going to be moving all of the furniture from our current property to our new one tomorrow, and then internet is going to be installed on December 29th. It is the 22nd that I'm recording this. The 29th is next Friday, so there's going to be quite light content until that, but obviously it's Christmas. It's like Christmas in 3 days. What am I on about talking about work and getting content done and stuff like that? But what we're going to do for this podcast is that I'm going to be doing the feature presentations. I'm going to be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi. I'm going to be talking about underrated Christmas films, and also taking some questions and topics and get some shout outs to my patrons. And then what's going to happen is that I'm going to do an extended lightning round episode. I'm going to record that immediately after this. I'm going to go on my Twitter and on my Facebook and answer all of the lightning round questions, but instead of 1 minute, I'm going to dedicate maybe 3 or 4 minutes to each question, so it's an extended one, so you're getting 2 episodes over Christmas. That should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that. I did have a sneak peek at some of the questions I've been asked, because I have been using Twitter throughout the day as the questions have been coming in, which is normally what I don't do, but I do know that there have been some very good questions asked, so I'm really looking forward to that segment of the podcast. So without further ado, instead of a share the love segment, I'm just going to tell you all to whatever grievances or whatever's happening with your family or any friends or whatever drama you may have had recently in the past couple of weeks and months, maybe try and put that to one side just for Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever religion you celebrate. I may not say happy holidays, I will say Merry Christmas, but whatever the hell you're having, I hope you have a good one this year, and I hope that you're able to see some family members. If you have a family member that you don't often see and you fear that they may be alone at Christmas, maybe reach out to them if possible, or maybe do the same thing to a friend, invite them over to Christmas or spend an hour or two with them on that day and just give them a reason to look forward to Christmas Day or whatever holiday you're celebrating, however you want to do it, however you want to play it. So I just hope that you all have a very awesome, very Merry Christmas, and I will share the love to all of you, to all my patrons, to everyone listening, and also to your extended family and friends who hopefully will have a great Merry Christmas to those, because they'll be spending it with you. And I'd also like to propose a toast. If any of you are holding a drink, I would like you to all raise your glasses, your mugs, whatever, your plastic cups, whatever it is you're holding. I'd like to raise a glass to all of the lovely people who, for better or for worse, whatever reason it may be, could not be with you on Christmas or throughout the holidays. I will be delivering a toast to my Uncle Brian, who passed away about a month and a half, 2 months ago, after a short battle with cancer. So I'll be raising a glass or a mug full of cold tea. Like I said, I was on the phone to a Virgin Media online person for like 30 minutes and my tea went cold, and I'm very, very sad about that. But I'll be raising a cold glass of tea to my Uncle Brian, who unfortunately cannot be here this Christmas, and I hope that you will all do the same to whoever cannot be there for your Christmas or any... I'm rambling. But anyway, have a very Merry Christmas. I'm going to take a swig of my tea. And let's talk about something not remotely controversial, and that is Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now, this has been such an interesting couple of days on the internet and in terms of film discourse, because Star Wars The Last Jedi what Disney has been doing is that they've been releasing these Star Wars films when there's basically almost nothing else of interest in theatres. Like, that's not to say that films such as Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, or Pitch Perfect 3, or Ferdinand, or a couple of others aren't worth talking about, but in terms of ones that are going to dominate the cultural conversation, I don't think there are going to be many think pieces talking about the ethics of Jumanji, or the divided reception to Pitch Perfect 3, or whether or not we were duped because of the mysteries in the Ferdinand animated prequel series. I don't know, we're probably not going to be getting anything like that, but as a result of its placement in the holidays, Star Wars The Last Jedi has been able to dominate the conversation, and as a result, a couple of topics can be spread across thousands and millions and billions of viewers who are interested in the source material or interested in the franchise, so it makes it a very interesting movie to talk about at a time when there, relatively speaking, is not that much to talk about, which further amplifies those voices. So Star Wars The Last Jedi, I did a fully spoiler-filled review on the Movie Mania podcast. That's up on Podcast Media and Bandit Incorporated's YouTube channel. It was a really fun podcast to do. It was about 3 hours long, but we talk about a lot more, including the 20th Century Fox and Marvel deal. We talk about the Golden Globes nominations, but the main topic is, of course, Star Wars The Last Jedi. So what I will do is I will give a relatively spoiler-free opinion on the Star Wars The Last Jedi. I will potentially talk about one or two plot points, but nothing that I think constitute as a major twist or as a reveal. This is something that, like, this review is the type that if you have not yet seen Star Wars The Last Jedi, and if you're one of the ones who just wants to know nothing about the film at all, you want zero knowledge, then I recommend you use the timestamps in the description or in the information section below on your app or on YouTube, however you watch or listen to this podcast. You use that those timestamps to skip ahead. But if you're the type of person who has yet to see the film and is just generally not that bothered about spoilers, then I'll maybe mention one or two things, but nothing major in the grand scheme of things. At least it's all subjective in my opinion, but that's basically how this is going to go, so you have all been warned. So, Star Wars The Last Jedi, I really dug it. I really like Star Wars The Last Jedi, and in a way, I've not been a massive, huge fan of the recent Disney approach to Star Wars, because I think Star Wars The Force Awakens, while a good film, is they got J.J. Abrams, and J.J. Abrams is such an unremarkable filmmaker in that his main primary talent has been able to emulate filmmakers who are really awesome from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So, as a result, what you get is a perfect recreation of the tone and feel of the original Star Wars trilogy, and not much else. I think that The Force Awakens really could have stood to have taken many more risks and could have stood to have branched out further with the material, as opposed to being an almost beat-for-beat retread of A New Hope. Now, I'm not the type of person who says, oh, it sucks because it's so unoriginal. I actually think Force Awakens is a good film. It's entertaining. I have a good time watching it. I gave it a 7 out of 10 on my website. I just think that if you are bringing back Star Wars for a new generation, or if you're wanting to restart a new trilogy, you kind of have to put your best foot forward, as opposed to the foot that everyone already knows was good and everybody already loved. I understand that people say that after the prequel trilogy that people needed to be reacclimatized to the Star Wars that they knew and love, but that was what the marketing campaign was for. They had over a year to advertise The Force Awakens as a film that everybody would love, and then once they have that audience already on board and all ready to go, then they could have taken us in some different and new directions for the film. I understand the argument. I just think that the marketing campaign and the marketing campaign alone should have done that, and that The Force Awakens could have done a bit more to push the boat out. But what it did was that it set up the franchise, and it set up all of the people and everything in place to expand on the universe. And also, I'm that guy who really liked Rogue One and preferred it to The Force Awakens. And now we arrive at The Last Jedi, which takes place immediately after the events of The Force Awakens. And this is kind of the Star Wars film that I really wanted to see. It was bold, it was creative, it took risks, but not in an obnoxious way. I thought it was just really well done, and it's an interesting way that, I don't even think that Rian Johnson, before this at least, was a particularly notable filmmaker. I was not a big fan of Looper. I thought Brick was okay. I think Looper, I recall in my book, my 2012 film review book, that I gave it a 5 out of 10, and I stand by that rating. That film, it's kind of like It Follows, where it sets up these rules and it sets up this universe, and then it continually over the course of the film proceeds to break the rules that it itself set up, and that's really frustrating and annoying, and I just didn't find the drama to be quite interesting. But that's one thing Disney have been able to do with Star Wars and its directors, like J.J. Abrams and Gareth Roberts. Was it Gareth Roberts or Gareth Evans who did Rogue One? And then Rian Johnson, who are three directors I don't think are particularly, like, at least their back catalogue of work was particularly good, and then they kind of had Star Wars to bring out the best of them. So let's see how that continues to go in the future in regards to the Solo movie, and also J.J. Abrams again for Episode 9, but that's beside the point. So The Last Jedi, I thought was... there's a lot of like backlash concerning the film. It's an incredibly divisive film, and it's just so frustrating. Like, see, the new Netflix film has come out, Bright, directed by David Ayer and written by Max Landis. And one of the reviews, I think it was for Variety or something, it was on my Facebook, the review came up and it said that one of the worst films of the year. And like, the most top-rated comment was worst film of the year. They clearly haven't seen Star Wars The Last Jedi. And it kind of reminds me of when people were reacting to The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey and saying, oh, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey is one of the worst films I've seen this year. And it's like, dude, that was 2012, right? Did you watch Top Cat the movie? Did you watch the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 2? Did you watch, like, Project X? Like, holy shit, man. Like, fair enough if you didn't like the film, but that's massive hyperbole, and you need to have some sense of perspective. Yeah, maybe Star Wars The Last Jedi is the worst film you saw this year, if you only saw 2 films this past year, but I think that there are a few issues that are present in Star Wars The Last Jedi. I think that what you get is a oddly structured film, and I think there are a couple of cheesy and awkward moments, and there are maybe 1 or 2 instances where you might, if you're not completely on the film's level, it may come across as a bit jarring and weird to you. However, that having been said, those were only a couple of instances, and there are only a handful of those moments in the film, and this is a film where the whole is infinitely better than the sum of its parts, in my opinion. It's one reason why I really gravitated towards Rogue One, because I'm really into theming, I'm really into subtext, I'm really into what's thematically happening as opposed to what is narratively happening. Not to say that that one's more important than the other, or automatically narrative or theme trump each other. Either way, it's just, it depends on the film, but in this case, theme really stuck out to me over the narrative. But with Star Wars The Last Jedi, it's kind of taking a similar approach to The Force Awakens, where it is telling its own weird meta-narrative, where The Force Awakens was very much about this new generation of fans, in this case, who grew up on these stories of these old heroes, and then learning their own place in the world. And Star Wars The Last Jedi takes those themes, runs with it, and then proceeds to deconstruct them in a way. There are some segments which seem to deliberately play on audience expectations, like there's a scene in Supreme Leader Snoke's throne room, which seems to almost deliberately mirror the Emperor's confrontation with Luke in The Return of the Jedi. And there's even a scene where the hero, Rey or Luke in this case, is made to look outside of a window at a doomed group of their friends. Like, this is deliberately happening, but then what happens is that it's so cleverly subverted and pulls the rug out from that complacent audience who are kind of expecting maybe beat for beat retread. And there's also a sequence earlier on, it might actually be around the same time of the film, where there's a undercover mission, and what happens is that the mission does not go, to quote Luke Skywalker, the way you think. And people, as a result of that not going the way they think, they write off the entire subplot as pointless. And the subplot in question regarding John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran going on this subplot to go to a casino planet and go to free these animals and go and find a code breaker in order to escape the First Order, people are saying that it's a pointless segment. Now, I will kind of meet you halfway. It is oddly structured, it is overlong, it could have been trimmed down, it could have been polished up, it is easily the weakest segment of the film, but it is not pointless for a variety of reasons. So you do have this subplot which really could have, like, I don't think you could have entirely got rid of it, and it also tries to deal with themes of the military-industrial complex and animal cruelty, which are worthy topics to explore in the Star Wars universe, but if you're going to do it, you kind of have to commit to it as opposed to have it be background dressing, otherwise what is the point? But in terms of the actual events that happen and how they influence the ending of the film, it's not pointless in the least. You are using the wrong choice of words. And when it comes to some major reveals, such as why, who is Supreme Leader Snoke, who are Rey's parents. What was Luke's motivation for exiling himself? People are saying that they were either thrown away or there was they spat in the face of fans. They're not really, because like, not to actually give them away, but for the Snoke reveal, it's basically no different than, say, Tarkin in A New Hope. It's no different. Snoke was not built up as a massive mystery in The Force Awakens. He just simply wasn't. He was just the bad guy. He was a function over form type of bad guy. And what we have with Rey's parents is that if it would have been any other outcome than it was in The Last Jedi, it would have been basically contradicting the entire themes at play in The Force Awakens. If you watch The Force Awakens, it's clear that that is the direction it's going in. So when people were saying, I think that Rey's parents are so-and-so and so-and-so, I think they're these key players in the universe, I think they're these major characters, I think that Rey's parents are these characters who are in the expanded universe, but they'll be making a return. They're in the Legend series that was wiped from canon, but they'll be coming back and they'll be Rey's parents. If they had gone in those directions, it would have actively contradicted the themes of The Force Awakens. So when people were saying, oh, so Trilbee, who do you think Rey's parents are? I would say, one, I don't care, because there's an entire scene in The Force Awakens where Maz Kanata says to Rey, you have to accept it that they're not coming back for you. You have to stop looking at the past and look to the future. It's the entire point of her character. Like, I don't care, because the movie, by proxy also, does not care about Rey's parents. So, and when they said, who do you think they'll be? I was bang on the money as to who they would be, because it was the only way that could have worked. It's kind of reading the language of film. It's reading what is subtext, what is text, what is happening thematically. And I said this on Twitter, but I'll say it again. It sounds so snobby. I hate the fact I have to say this out loud, because it makes me come across as one of those critics who is just so condescending to the plebs who watch these films. Oh, go watch your Jumanji and I'll be here with my high art. Oh, I don't care about Ferdinand, because Loving Vincent is the only film I will see this year, because that's true animation. Like, not say that Loving Vincent is not good. I really want to see that film, but I'm not that type of critic. You know, crying out loud, Deathly Hallows Part 2, Toy Story 3, Pacific Rim, and The Avengers have been like my number one favourite film of the respective years they came out. I am not that critic, but what has been hugely apparent in the discourse regarding Star Wars: The Last Jedi is that while the mainstreamification of these franchises and film discourse and film analysis and like the talk of behind the scenes dealings and everything, while that is in a way a good thing, it also shows that so many people out there with voices, with megaphones, with a public platform on Facebook or Twitter or whatever comment section you want to be on, they actually have no idea how to read film. I know that sounds so like condescending, but when it's clear that some people who really, really disliked The Last Jedi or just really want to be contrarian, or they don't quite know exactly what they liked about it and will kind of cherry pick these aspects which really don't make any sort of sense, that they don't quite know how to read film. And it's like when I was younger, like the thing that got me into media in terms of making media and analysing it and dissecting it was Doctor Who. But before that, I just kind of watched it and was not quite that engaged in terms of analysing it. It's like I was hugely into Doctor Who and I'd watch it all the time. I had posters, I had books, I had merchandise. I was a huge fan. But whenever an episode came along that I didn't quite like, I couldn't really say why. I didn't know what didn't work about it. It was only when I became older and I started to dissect media and talk about it semi-professionally and also end up working on it in the end, that I'm able to sort of break film down and TV down, or media in general, into component parts. In a way, it's what makes me, hopefully, fingers crossed, a good critic, or someone who is able to, at least, even if you don't agree with me, able to communicate why I did or did not like something. And as a result, when people, the main positive result that I want whenever I talk about a film in detail or in a spoiler-filled environment or whatever, or in conversation, is for the person I'm talking to say, I don't agree with you, but I know where you're coming from. I understand. I see it. I see what you're saying. I get it. I just disagree. And that's cool. That is fine. And I get it. But then when you have people who say, oh, it's the SJW, the last SJW, Star Wars, the Snowflakes Awakened, and the film had a Vietnamese woman, therefore it's bad, or oh, why is it Black Wars, because there's a black guy in the lead, and oh, there's a woman, she's a Mary Sue, like, and when people say, what was it? Someone was complaining on Twitter the other day. I can't remember exactly what their argument was, but it was like, how can Rey do these things when she had like absolutely no combat training, or she's never done these things before, and it's completely stupid. Like when you go back to Star Wars: A New Hope, crying out loud, Luke Skywalker was able to destroy the Death Star by magic by focusing really hard, and like he'd never actually been in a combat scenario in an X-Wing before, but was still able to destroy the Death Star. Like, it's that type of selective criticism, like, oh, this thing was from my childhood and I loved it, therefore it's free from criticism, but that exact same logic does not apply to something that came out like recently. And it's just pedantic, and people say, oh, these characters were pointless, and there's so much, like, if you're pedantic enough, you can apply that criticism, quote unquote, to every film ever in the blockbuster arena. Like, for example, in what film was it? Was it Captain America: Civil War? Like, it had Martin Freeman's character in it. Like, did he need, like, you could have completely cut him out of the film, but it's about world building, it's about all the characters, it's about just having maybe another interesting presence on screen in the form of Martin Freeman. Like, sometimes a large supporting cast is not inherently a bad thing, it depends on how you play it. And in terms of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, it's playing such a meta-narrative where your heroes will disappoint you. If Star Wars: The Force Awakens was a movie for the fans, Star Wars: The Last Jedi is a movie for fans who are growing up. It's about, in a way, letting go of the past, or at least acknowledging the past in not a particularly favourable light. One of the lessons that Luke Skywalker is trying to teach Rey is the folly of the Jedi, which the prequels was dedicated to in a way, but not successfully communicated. So it's such a interesting and rich subtextual film, and I'll be there when I say that there's a few moments that are a bit silly. For example, there's a sequence early on with Princess Leia, or General Leia, sorry, you'll know exactly what I mean, and I think it's one of those moments where maybe they should have cut it out, because the heavy loss of Carrie Fisher on this franchise, who passed away around this time last year, that kind of looms over this film, and to sort of, like, I'm not saying that they exploited that, but when that happens, it's kind of like, it should be a heroic and lovely moment, but considering what's really happened to the actress, it just comes across as a little bit tone deaf, maybe. But there's a few moments like that and a few isolated sequences, but I kind of ignore that in the face of just such rich characterization. For example, like Kylo Ren, who is such a wonderfully rich and complex villain. Like, I love Darth Vader. I think he's such a wonderful and iconic and brilliant movie villain, but Kylo Ren is he's like an onion. He's just got so many layers. And also, I am loving the memes coming out of a scene where he's shirtless. I'm loving those memes. That, like, internet, don't stop that. Maybe stop the racism and the sexism and such, but keep going with the funny memes of a topless Adam Driver. And people were saying that the First Order is completely terrible and embarrassing. And no, they're not. They're almost they're metaphorically breathing down the Resistance neck over the course of this film. They are a looming, powerful presence over a dwindling Resistance. I think it's really effectively done. And also, you kind of, when you consider Kylo Ren, he is a guy who, after the events of The Force Awakens and what happens over the course of The Last Jedi, is that he is not a cool and calculated villain. He is rash. He is a bit immature. He's a bit of a man baby, but in a way that kind of makes him a bit more terrifying, because there is no dark side or light side with him. There is only turmoil and conflict. His moral compass in The Force Awakens, and definitely in The Last Jedi, is thrown so askew. He doesn't know what's up or down, what's left or what's right. He does not have any sort of moral compass left, and that is equally terrifying, if not more so, because you are dealing with someone who potentially is so far off the deep end that they can't be reasoned with, and they are as a result very unpredictable and very volatile. I think that approach to a villain is really fascinating, and Adam Driver is such a great presence on screen that he is able to pull it off. I love the cast. I think that Daisy Ridley is really maturing as a performer. She was great in The Force Awakens, and she's even better here in The Last Jedi. And Mark Hamill, if this is gonna sound maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but we're talking, like, if it was me, best supporting actor at the Oscar contention here. He's incredible here. He's great. He's funny. He's smart. He's brooding, but not in an emo way. This is a guy who has seen shit, you know. Like, for example, if A New Hope is about this new, like, for example, Luke Skywalker is meant to be the generation. What generation was it in the 70s? It was the generation of teenagers who were growing up in during the Vietnam War. And Obi-Wan Kenobi was meant to be the World War II veteran who was the type of guy who wouldn't socialize, who was a bit of a loner, who had seen some stuff in World War II, and is meant to be teaching the next generation about war and about their own place in that world. If we're going by that metaphor here, then The Last Jedi is like Luke Skywalker is the Vietnam veteran having to speak to a millennial generation who are dealing with everything that's happening in the modern world. And the use of that metaphor is really quite potent. And Mark Hamill with his raggedy beard and his voice, I just love the way he shouts as well. I whenever he shouts or raises his voice, I kind of do hear the Joker, which is a bit funny. And then when he really comes into his own in the last 10-15 minutes of the film, it's really powerful stuff. And Mark Hamill, he shows up and he knocks it out of the park. He is just a wonderful presence. It's his best performance as Luke Skywalker, in a way that's not saying much. Not to say he was bad in the original trilogy, but nothing particularly incredible or great. But here he shows up and delivers, and that maturity and that age and the wisdom and the poise and the posture, the way he holds himself and the delivery of his lines in the last 10-15 minutes is a sight to behold. And the closing moments of the film, it made me almost weep. I like the great music choices and the cinematography. And oh my god, the cinematography. There was a review that Jeremy Jahns did of The Last Jedi saying that there's a shot in the film which we can use as a wallpaper or a screensaver for your desktop, and you'll know it when you see it. And that comment has kind of confused me in retrospect, because there's like 6 of those things. The cinematography by Steve Yedlin, who is a frequent collaborator with Rian Johnson on Looper and the brothers Bloom and Brick, shows up and just is really brilliant here. Like, I was not a big fan of Looper, but I did like some of the cinematography. I liked the inventive camera angles. I thought they were quite well done. But like the Last Jedi is just a stunning looking film, and there's some of the most beautiful tableaus of the entire Star Wars franchise. It's incredible stuff. The effects are great. The sound design is really well done. It's just great stuff on like a blockbuster level. It's a really good film, man. Really good. I can meet certain people halfway in terms of some criticisms to it, but this is not the worst Star Wars film. Not in my opinion, it is like in the top 5. It is a great Star Wars film. When I say top 5, that might not be the best compliment ever, but it is, when considering that top 5 consists of the entire original trilogy. I think that it's quite good company to be a part of. I think The Last Jedi is a great film. I kind of like it on the same level that I loved Rogue One, which was really, really good. I preferred it much more than The Force Awakens did, and it's just really, really good. I've only seen it the one time, but the more I think about it, the more it sticks with me, the more layers kind of open themselves up to me. I think it is just a terrific Star Wars film, and I'm really looking forward to Star Wars Episode 9 on December 20th, 2019. And in about 5 months' time, we've got Solo, a Star Wars story, which is that's going to be fun. There's no trailer for it. It comes out on May 25th, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months away, and we have yet to see a trailer for it. But I like the on-screen talent: Holden Ehrenreich, Emilia Clarke, Woody Harrelson, Donald Glover. I think the talent in front of the camera is solid, but whether or not like Ron Howard has been able to pull this out of the bag, whether or not the potential damage, quote unquote, that Phil Lord and Chris Miller did could be repaired. But like Phil Lord and Chris Miller would have made a Star Wars movie that I would have been like first in line for. I think they're terrific filmmakers, and their firing and the hiring of Ron Howard kind of shows that they didn't really want anything particularly creative. They maybe wanted something by the books, which the firing and the subsequent hiring of Ron Howard really kind of dropped this film's anticipation for me. I think that Ron Howard is a very, very good filmmaker, but will he make an interesting Star Wars film? I don't think he will, but I'm really open to be proven wrong, and I really hope that I am proven wrong, that I hope that all pans out really well in the end. Now it's time for the next segment of the podcast, where we're going to be talking about, in my opinion, underrated Christmas films. Now, I need to sort of set the stage here for what is underrated. What is my personal definition for underrated, which may not entirely line up with your definition of underrated, but we need to get this out in the open first in order to find out exactly what we're dealing with here. So when I define underrated, I mean films that either not many people saw, of like we get these massive huge Christmas films that come out all the time, or ones that you watch every year, like It's a Wonderful Life or Elf, or let's say something like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which you maybe could consider a Christmas film, I don't know, or maybe Miracle on 34th Street, and these big year in year out. Home Alone is another one as well, these Christmas films that I've seen year in year out, and these are films that may be ones that, not in my personal anecdotal experience, hardly anyone watches year in year out, or also maybe some ones that maybe people either have not heard of, or ones that people seem to think are okay, but I actually think are underrated gems. So I'm going to open this list with a honourable mention, because it's a film that I think should be embraced more worldwide, but I'm not entirely sure where the rest of the world stands on it, and that's Nativity, which is a 2009 film directed by Debbie Izzet, and I have not seen the sequels, Nativity 2, Danger in the Manger, or Nativity 3, Dude, Where's My Donkey. I only know those films by their sterling reputation, but Nativity was a massive breath of fresh air when it came out. I remember actually it had a big advertising push in 2009 in the UK when it came out, and it was a film that didn't look great from the trailers. It kind of seemed like, oh, it's just another kids film, but then the reviews started coming out and it started to get quite a good amount of acclaim. So I remember going to the cinema with my mum to watch it, and we both left the screening really elated. It was a really good film. So the plot is that Martin Freeman is a primary school teacher in it's a slightly impoverished, or not a very well looked after or well maintained primary school in the UK, and he wanted to be like an aspiring actor, but now he's teaching primary school kids, and he has to put on the nativity play this year, and the kids are just not that very cooperative. That some of them aren't that talented, they're not very bright, and what happens is that there's a miscommunication where they think that Hollywood is going to be coming to the UK to watch their nativity play, so they have to put on the biggest spectacle ever, and that may not sound like the best plot ever, and it is kind of it's reliant on the whole liar revealed subplot, and the whole, if you just explained the situation immediately, this would not get out of control, but it's kind of a suspension of disbelief moment that is needed for this film. But it's really, really heartfelt. The emotions are real. The kids are a lot of fun in the film. Martin Freeman is a really great straight man to the chaos. And before the sequels apparently really just over-egged the pudding, Mark Wootton voicing playing the teacher assistant Mr. Poppy, who is basically a massive grown-up man baby who is able to relate with the kids, was actually pretty fun in the film. And the reason that this is only an honourable mention and not a actual slot on the list or the top 5, because this is episode 25 and every multiple of 5 I do a top 5 for the podcast, is because this is a big film in the UK. People do watch this film every year. People do. There's even a West End musical show based on this film that is currently playing in my city, I think, as well. This is a big film in the UK, but I have no idea where the rest of the world stand on it. I don't know if this is a big film in America. I don't know what its international appeal is. All I know is that in the UK, this is actually a Christmas tradition film, a relatively recent one as well. This came out in 2009. So this came out the same year as Disney's Robert Zemeckis' motion capture Jim Carrey Christmas Carol film. And the Nativity, ironically enough, despite being a more contemporary film that is not based off of the timeless classic like Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, we'll get onto that one later, this has actually managed to stand the test of time in recent years. The sequels, not so much so. I actually worked at HMV last Christmas when, for me, in the media industry, work gets quite slow, so I worked at HMV over December, and we had Nativity on its own for like $3.99 or $4.99 on DVD, or we could have the box set of all three films for like £5. And no question, everyone wanted the first DVD. They did not want the box set. They did not care about the box set. They just wanted that first Martin Freeman film. Because Martin Freeman, he wasn't in the sequels. In Nativity 2, he was replaced by David Tennant. And in Nativity 3, he was replaced by Martin Clunes. So that's a very weird escalation. So Nativity is a really good film. If you are outside of the UK and have not heard of it, I highly recommend you check it out. It's directed by Debbie Izzet and written by her as well. It's got some really catchy, awesome original songs which you actually frequently hear on the radio. It's just a really good, heartfelt Christmas film. I believe it's on UK Netflix as well, so be sure to check that out. Check out Nativity, which is an honourable mention in my top 5 most underrated Christmas films ever. So the impetus for me to make this list was actually born out of a film I saw recently at the cinema. And it is this is in no particular order, by the way, but so these are just 5 underrated Christmas films, not a top 5. But the first one I'm going to talk about is the film that kind of inspired this list in the first place, and that is The Man Who Invented Christmas, directed by Bharat Naruli and written by Susan Coyne. Now, The Man Who Invented Christmas is based on the Christmas Carol book by Charles Dickens, but it's not based off the book. It is based off his allegedly real-life experience in making and writing the book, because the film starts shortly after the release of Oliver Twist, where Charles Dickens is on top of the world. This is a massive best-selling hit. He's done really, really well, but then over the next few years he has a string of flops, and his publications do not do very, very well, and he needs to get out of this writer's block. He needs to get out of this sort of spiral. He's got a new kid on the way, his wife is pregnant, he's having domestics with his family, he's struggling to make ends meet, and he needs to write a massive success of a book. And what he has to do is he decides he's going to write a Christmas Carol, and he has to get it finished in 6 weeks in order to get it published by Christmas, but he's unable to get it published at his normal publishing firm, so he has to self-publish it. He has to self-finance it, he has to get out loans, he has to risk everything he has in order to publish this book. And it's out in cinemas at the moment in the UK. I think it's also got a fairly limited release in the US as well. But I went into this film not expecting much at all, and I was kind of blown away by it. This actually may wind up in my top 10 of 2017. If not at least an honourable mention. This is a really, really good Christmas film. Now, the direction is a bit TV movie-ish, but what really brings it all together is the wonderful screenplay by Susan Coyne, a multi-layered and subtextual masterpiece. There is so much depth to this film that I don't think I can watch it again without a lifeguard present. There's so much here in terms of Charles Dickens, his autobiographical nature in regards to the writing of A Christmas Carol, and not just in the way how he allegedly got the inspiration for Ebenezer Scrooge by witnessing a crotchety old man say humbug to him while while being the sole presence of somebody at a funeral, but in the way that he is having trouble with his family over Christmas, and he is able to kind of sympathise with Scrooge in the way he's sort of resenting the holidays, and he needs to examine himself in a way like, can Ebenezer Scrooge really change his entire personality and change everything in one night? And in a way he doesn't have a proper answer for that, but he makes it happen in his book because he needs it to be true, and he has his own terrible experiences in workhouses and how his family kind of abandoned him because his family was caught up in so much hidden debt that his father accumulated over a long amount of time, so he had to be abandoned and work off some of the debt in a workhouse, and how that's one of the impetus for, that's one of the reasons why Charles Dickens was such an advocate for poor working class families in England at the time, and why he would often make books that catered towards them and to tell their plight, like Oliver Twist, and why he would support a family like the Cratchits in the Christmas Carol book, which in my opinion is one of the best pieces of fiction ever written. It's a terrific read, and the relationship he has with one of his friends, who winds up being represented in the book as the ghost of Christmas Present. It's just really, really good. So what you have is a really interesting story that it's good for kids as well. It does have a couple of darker tones to it, and maybe the film could have gone darker if it wasn't also just trying to get in a younger family-friendly audience. But because we do delve into some rather dark territory here, but Christopher Plummer is terrific as Ebenezer Scrooge as well, because what we have is Charles Dickens, as he's writing the book in his study, the actual characters from the book kind of become tangible in his mind, and they are personified by a variety of actors, and they come into his study and talk to him, and he has conversations with Scrooge, and Scrooge at one point says, can we talk about my side of the story? Can we talk about me for a bit? It's a really interesting way to take it, and according to some reports from people who knew Charles Dickens, that was kind of how he wrote. He would envisage these people and have conversations with them in his free time. And he had so many issues with writing the third act and the ending of the story, that he was going to have Tiny Tim die, and that was going to be the end of there was not going to be no elation at the end. There was going to be no happy ending in a way, and it's just so interesting to know all of that. The cast are great. Dan Stevens is really good as Charles Dickens. Christopher Plummer steals the freaking show. I really like the cast, and in a way Susan Coyne's script is really what elevates that material, so I really recommend you watch The Man Who Invented Christmas. It's underrated in a way because I think it's only in the 60s and 70s on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas I'm giving this a friggin' 9 out of 10. I think this is a really terrific Christmas film. Just a great drama as well, and just a great look at the insight of a writer and how everything in a way is autobiographical. It was a really, really great film. I'm going to be, as soon as it's on Blu-ray or DVD, I'm going to be checking it out. I'm going to be picking it up and watching it next Christmas and probably the year after that. It might be an interesting double feature with a Muppets Christmas Carol. We're like, oh, it's Dan Stevens one moment, and oh, now it's Gonzo. That's a weird transition, but yeah, that's going to be a Christmas Carol's main presence on this list, because there's no more adaptations on this list. But The Man Who Invented Christmas is going to be a film I watch year in, year out. It is a terrific drama. Okay, number 2 on the list, we have a awesome recent horror comedy in the form of Krampus. Now, this is a bit of a polarizing film. This is a film that many people just did not like, did not agree with, but for me, it was just terrific. It made my top 15 of 2015 list. I loved it that much. Now, Krampus tells the story of this family, and you've got this kid called Max, who intends on sending a letter to Santa Claus, but he gets into a massive argument with his family, and he rips up the letter, and because of his lack of Christmas spirit, the evil demon Krampus comes to visit the family, and Krampus is kind of like the anti-Santa, where he'll take kids away, or he'll give them coal. It depends on which iteration of the legend you believe in. But this is directed by Michael Dougherty, who did the film, the horror anthology film Trick or Treat, and is also directing the upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters sequel, which should be pretty good because it's directed by friggin' Michael Dougherty. But you have a really great cast here. You've got Adam Scott, Toni Collette, David Kushner, Alison Tolman. It's a really good cast. The child actors do really well as well. But what really makes this film kind of stand head and shoulders above other horror comedies is not only the terrific practical effects, like a horrifying clown Jack-in-the-Box creation, and also some CGI really cute and horrifying gingerbread men, and the amazing Krampus creature itself. And there's also a really great stop-motion Rankin Bass type animated sequence detailing the grandmother who once met Krampus when she was a child. There's just a really knowing level of cynicism to Krampus, where it talks like the very opening like minutes of the film just set the stage perfectly for a perfect environment for Krampus to exist and to take his revenge on these materialistic and shallow people for kind of forgetting the true meaning of Christmas. And the ways in which they're taken out is really clever. There's some really good jump scares, some great moments of tension. It's just a really great film. The performances are awesome, but what really kind of helps to make it go above and beyond is the closing minutes, where the final seconds of the film are a bit let down by the whole Blumhouse like jump scare, like the final scare before the credits roll. That's really pants as well. But the way that Max and Krampus's interactions at the very end of the film are really kind of scary, and the I won't spoil the ending for you, but it's just such a bummer note and such a great note for the film to end on that I can't help but applaud it. It is a great horror comedy. You're laughing, it's scary, the practical effects, and even some of the CGI effects are done really, really well. Performances are great, the creature designs are inventive. It's a really great mythology to explore. I really hope there's another Krampus film. It's got such a interesting tonal balance that it's somehow able to, in my opinion, I know many people disagree completely, and that's absolutely fine, but it's able to go on that tightrope and do amazing tricks, and it's so fun. It's kind of like, it's a mix between Halloween mixed with Gremlins with a dash of Small Soldiers and holiday spirit. And if that sounds appealing to you, or if there's any aspect of, like, watch the film's trailer, and if any of that appeals to you, then I think personally you're going to love Krampus. Its characters are endearing, its themes are subversive, the scares are palpable, the humour is endearing, and the production values are really, really good. And like much like Michael Dougherty's own Trick or Treat, it's, in my opinion, I think it's destined to become a cult classic, and I'd love to see what he does. Like maybe Thanksgiving could be a fun holiday to make scary. It's such an admirable film. I really, really appreciate and admire the whole production, and I recommend you watch the film Krampus, or Krampus, depending on how you want to name it. But yeah, I really, really like Krampus. So going in completely the opposite direction, the next film I'm going to be talking about is the French language film Joyeux Noël, which is translated to Merry Christmas. Now this is telling the true story of the 1914 Christmas ceasefire in the trenches in no man's land in World War I. The film is directed by Christian Carrion, and it's also written by him as well. It was the French language entry into the Academy Awards for Best Foreign Language Film, although it did not win that year. It was just a nominee. So it's a really dramatic film. It's obviously dealing with a very intense subject matter, and it's also kind of showcasing the very heart of the situation. This is a war that was meant to have been over months and months ago. This is December 1914. War was only declared a few months ago, and they thought, oh, we'll be home by Christmas, and then that Christmas comes, and these men are still in the trenches. And the film has got a multi-pronged narrative. We are following these two opera singers who are going to be performing at the trenches. They kind of risk going out in order to perform for the soldiers. We've got Benno Furman and Diane Kruger as these two opera singers. And we also follow this soldier who was encouraged to join the army by his older brother, and then his father, who is a priest, becomes a pastor at the front lines in order to bless the soldiers. And we also have the Scottish leader. We've got Gordon, who is a lieutenant, a lieutenant. Sorry, we have Audebert, who's a French lieutenant, and Horst Mayer, who is a Jewish German lieutenant as well, and he's played here by Daniel Bruhl. And if you recognise that name, Daniel Bruhl, that's Baron Zemo from Captain America: Civil War, and he was also in Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds and in Ron Howard's Rush, and I think he should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Rush, but that's a conversation for another time. This is one of Daniel Bruhl's best performances. So I think the actual story itself really does carry the film, where it is, you have a Christmas ceasefire between all these opposing sides, and they set down their arms on Christmas Eve and they start singing carols with each other, and on Christmas Day they start playing football with each other, they start trading gifts, and they start talking and socialising. And what I really like about Joyeux Noël is that the plot does not just stop there. They go they follow the story after Christmas Day as to whether or not they can continue the ceasefire, whether and the ramifications that happen to them. I feel like the film could have maybe gone a bit further in that regard. It feels like, as the closing seconds of the film happen, it's like, oh god, what's going to happen next? And then the film kind of stops. And even though these events are based off of real people or like inspired by true events, there is no text at the end of the film saying this happened to this person, this happened to this person did this next. And I feel like it was kind of missing from that. And it's the most important scene in the film is when you have Audibert, who gets chastised by his dad, who's a general, and Audibert says that he would he has no idea what's happening in the war, what it's like to be in the trenches, and that he sympathised much more with his opponents during Christmas than he did with his own country, who was made him fight this war. And it's such an incredibly great sequence, and this film is littered with great set pieces and great dramatic moments and great performances. It is definitely a tearjerker, and I think you can only get it on Blu-ray, on DVD as well. Sorry, there is no Blu-ray release. I know HMV have done a new release with a new slipcase cardboard cover for the DVD. That's the version I've recently got, and it is also one that you have to watch with subtitles. The Scots do speak English, but you do get a lot of French and a lot of German in this film, so you will have to be watching this thing with subtitles, and it will demand your attention. But hey, it's what Christmas is all about, I guess. So be sure to check out Joël Noël, which came out in 2005. Next up on the list, we have another film that is quite close to home. We have Arthur Christmas, which is a CG animated film created by Aardman Animations and Sony Pictures Animation. It is directed by Sarah Smith and also It is written by Peter Bainham and also written by Sarah Smith. So we have it's an animated film about Arthur Christmas, who is one of the sons of Father Christmas, voiced by James McAvoy, who he is the next one of the next people in line in order to become the brand new Santa Claus. Jim Broadbent is the current Santa Claus. His dad is Bill Nighy, who was a former Santa Claus, and the current next in line is Hugh Laurie, who is Stephen Claus or Steve Claus. So he is hoping to modernize everything about being Father Christmas. He's big into technology. He's got a brand new electronic spaceship type sleigh, which is able to deliver all of the presents in one night, even faster and even easier. And what happens is that something happens, and one of the kids winds up not getting a present, and Arthur Christmas goes out of his way to make sure that this one kid, he has to deliver this one present by the end, by the time this kid wakes up. And it's a really great heartwarming story. So Arthur Christmas and Granddad Santa, voiced by Bill Nighy, have to travel to get this bike to this young girl at Christmas, and accompanying them is a young Scottish elf voiced by Ashley Jensen, who is obsessed with wrapping presents and has a great gift for wrapping and gift wrapping. She joins them on this journey. It's a really funny, really fast-paced film, and as you would imagine with anything that Aardman Animations do, is just brimming with personality and heart, and is filled to the brim with background jokes. There's so many gags in the background, you'll be laughing so much that you'll miss other jokes. The humour comes thick and fast, but it's never quite overwhelming. It's a really, really good film. The animation is really well done. The voice acting is terrific. It's just great to hear Hugh Laurie in anything. Bill Nighy is a lot of fun, and he's got one of the weirdest and funniest quotes ever. I can't remember exactly what the context is, but he says, well, once upon a time it was thought to be impossible to teach women to read. And I don't know why that makes me laugh or why that's so quotable. That probably makes me the worst person ever. But yeah, Arthur Christmas, it's underrated because it didn't do great at the box office. It was on a $100 million budget and it made $147 million, so it probably lost Sony a bit of money. And I also don't quite know how it's done outside of the UK, but it's a really good animated Christmas film. I think you can watch it on Amazon Prime. I don't believe it's on Netflix, but you can get it in quite cheaply on Blu-ray or on DVD as well, especially in the UK and probably in the US as well. But if you are wanting a different animated or children's film to watch at Christmas, Arthur Christmas is easily like the way to go. Arthur Christmas, out of everything on this list, I think is the easiest one to recommend. It has great animation. It is great. It's got great inventive visuals. The animation is really endearing. The character's great. The ending, oh my god, that ending is so touching and so heartwarming and like so perfectly done. It's really, really good. Teaches you just great morals and lessons. The voice cast are terrific. And like I said, that ending is just perfect. And the final Christmas film that I think is underrated is another one that was a big box office disappointment. And I saw it in the cinema the year it came out. It came out the same year as Krampus, and I went to cinema to watch it and had an awesome time. And not many people have watched it, but I've recommended it to a few people recently, and those who I have recommended it to have come back to me and said, Trilbee, this is so bloody funny, and I was laughing from beginning to end. It is The Night Before, directed by Jonathan Levine, and written by Jonathan Levine, Kyle Hunter, Ariel Shaffir, and Evan Goldberg. Yes, it's a Goldberg, Seth Rogen comedy. So the plot of The Night Before is that we have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who years ago he lost both of his parents on Christmas in a car accident. So what him and his friends, played by Seth Rogen and Anthony Mackie, do is that every year on Christmas Eve they go out and have a massive drunken high stoner night out. And it's 2015, it's been 14 years, and they decided that they have to end the tradition because Anthony Mackie is becoming a really famous athlete. Seth Rogen is married, he's got a baby on the way. Obviously he's not giving birth to the baby. His wife is played by Gillian Bell, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is trying to like move on with his life and is trying to make new friends and is trying to get into a relationship with Lizzie Kaplan. And what happens is that they've been dreaming of going to the Nutcracker Ball, which is this awesome, legendary invite-only Christmas Eve party, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt manages to get some tickets, so they decide to make this the night out to end all night out. And it's really funny. There's probably one sequence involving Seth Rogen, who but he's given a box of drugs from his wife for this night out, and he gets so high and so off his face that he becomes completely paranoid about having this kid becoming a dad. And when he's also a Jewish character as well, and he wears a Christmas jumper with the Star of David on the front, which is just, it never stops being a really funny image. And he goes into a Christian church, and the reaction he has when he's just so drunk and high and off his face and coked up and wasted is one of the funniest things I've ever seen Seth Rogen do. Seth Rogen, for many people, I imagine he's a bit hit or miss. And I think people who might have watched every single movie he's been in, like Superbad, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, or The Interview, might get a bit sick of him. But he really just lets loose in The Night Before, and the sequence of him in the church is just... It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I recommended the film to my brother as well, because it's on UK Netflix as well, so hopefully it finds a home there, and it finds a brand new audience. But he said that even the opening narration, which is done in rhyme, it's done by Tracy Morgan, even the rhyming that happens at the beginning made them laugh uncontrollably. And you've got Michael Shannon as well as a marijuana dealer, who follows them over the course of the film. It's really funny. You've got Mindy Kaling, you've got a great cameo by James Franco, which is really funny. And the cast is great as well. You also just do get the sense that these three, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Anthony Mackie, and Seth Rogen, really do have chemistry with each other, and it's really touching. It's a great story about friendship. There's not much in regards to the Christmas spirit, but it's still just a really fun film to deliver some great belly laughs. It feels... those of you who might not like the traditional Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg stoner comedies, I think that you should give this a shot. It does feel a bit more mainstream and accessible than those comedies, but and mainly due to the Christmas setting, it doesn't feel dumbed down or constrained. The cast are uniformly great. And there's kind of there is an undercurrent of holiday cheer and goodwill towards men in what could have just been a poop farts comedy. I don't know. It doesn't have to be something you watch every year at Christmas, but if you're a bit down in the dumps and you just want a really good Christmas pick me up, this is going to be like it's becoming a yearly viewing tradition for me, especially now that it's on Netflix. I actually need to get it on DVD. It's just a really good film. I really recommend you watch it. It is from Sony, so there is quite a bit of obnoxious product placements. For example, like Anthony Mackie's character does like deliberately over the course of the film shill Red Bull and like a Sony phone, so that's a bit obnoxious. But the rest of the film is really good, and it's I guess that sequence of Seth Rogen in the church that's worth the price of admission alone. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in any Christmas film. So those are the 5 Christmas films. So the honorable mention is Nativity. and the 5 are The Man Who Invented Christmas, which is in theatres now, Krampus, which you can easily get on DVD or Blu-ray, Arthur Christmas, which you can watch on Amazon streaming or get on DVD and Blu-ray as well, then Joël Noël, which you can get on DVD, and is also a French language film, so that might be slightly harder to track down, but it's really, really good, and The Night Before, which once again DVD and Blu-ray, and is also on UK Netflix. So those are my 5 or possibly 6 most underrated Christmas films, and I highly recommend that you check all of those out. So I'm going to, because we've been recording for quite a while, I'm going to talk about the Patron answers, the Patron topics and questions, and then I'm going to end the episode, and we're going to be talking about, we're going to be doing a follow-up episode I'll be recording immediately after this, which is the Q&A Patron and the Q&A Facebook and Twitter questions and answers for the lightning round, so that'll be an episode dedicated in and of itself. So the first post comes from Cassidy Winter, who says that I guess it's that time when we decide if Die Hard is a Christmas movie again. I don't have anything like a top 5 list of Christmas movies, but really anything that has a strong theme of family, blood or water is a good choice, although I have a soft spot for Home Alone. Home Alone is, in my opinion, no way, shape or form an underrated Christmas film, but it is one that is becoming mandatory yearly viewing. My fiance has not actually seen Home Alone. She told me this yesterday or the day before, so my mission for before the end of Christmas is to make her watch Home Alone. Home Alone 2 is also pretty good, I think, but definitely the first one, that's a really good film. Also, is Die Hard a Christmas film? Yes, it probably is a Christmas film, but it's so weird to have this discussion every single year where people think that they're the very first person to discover that Die Hard is set at Christmas, and that Christmas is not yet Christmas until Hans Gruber falls off the side of the Nakatomi Plaza. It's just not Christmas until that has happened. Cassidy also says that Murder on the Orient Express, the recent Kenneth Branagh version, was fantastic in my opinion, and Kenneth Branagh is a worthy successor to David Suchet. What are some of your favourite murder mystery properties? Murder on the Orient Express I thought was really good. I think Kenneth Branagh was great for the material. He's clearly very passionate about Poirot as a character. He really gave 110% to the depiction of the Belgian detective. The moustache is amazing as well. But in regards to some of my favourite murder mystery properties, the adaptation of Clue is something I need to rewatch. I watched it when I was much younger, probably too young to really appreciate it, but I remember really enjoying that, but I do need to watch it again. Murder mystery properties, there's quite a few like slasher films which you probably don't consider as murder mysteries, because like if it's a Halloween film, it's obviously Michael Myers who's done it. If it's a Child's Play film, it's obviously the doll that's done it. But it's a mystery to the rest of the characters, if that makes sense. But murder mysteries is not a genre that I'm quite I don't regularly frequent. It's in a way, in terms of the modern adaptation of it, in terms of the mainstream film industry, it's a bit of a quiet or like dormant genre, and every so often a thriller will come out which blows everybody away, like The Snowman. Not really, but the most recent one is probably David Fincher's Gone Girl, based off the book of the same name. And Gone Girl was a great a mystery thriller, because it's kind of a murder mystery, because it's even in the first half of the book, it has this person actually died, what has happened to them, like the fact that whether or not there even is a murder is a mystery for the first half of Gone Girl, which is a really great approach for the material. And Rosamund Pike and Ben Affleck are terrific. It's well directed. Tyler Perry is good in that film, and that's such a weird thing to say, but in regards to like some more old-fashioned murder mystery properties, I am woefully I'm woefully unexposed to that entire subgenre, I'm afraid. But things like Gone Girl or some horror / killer films, those are quite interesting in my opinion. Also, Cassidy says at the end of the message, thanks for your support during Australia's marriage equality postal survey. It came back with about a 60% yes result, so most of the major opposition backed down, probably for some plausible deniability, and a bill was passed. This thing is interesting to me, because marriage equality you shouldn't even need like a referendum or a public vote in order for it to pass. You should just do it. But because it's nice that the people of Australia did vote and they got the same-sex marriage equality passed. But then when you have something like a vote or a referendum and such, or just a public opinion, then you can have some very depressing statistics. Like, for example, if I Australia, I'm just going to get the number up because I forgot. I looked it up earlier, but I forgot it. So Australia marriage equality vote. It was 61.6% said yes and 38.4% said no. And yes, it's good that same-sex marriage has been passed in Australia, but think of it, now you know that 40% of the voting population do not believe that a certain section of their population is allowed an equal rights. That's a depressing thing to have laid bare in numerical figures. 40% of the voting population, or nearly voting percent, do not think that that homosexual or same-sex marriage is a right. And while it's great that you're able to have that, just knowing that number, it's kind of makes things depressing. But in a way, if you don't know the numerical amount of prejudice or the people who do not believe in equality, that's kind of the only way you can come to terms with that and start tackling and addressing the issue. But it's still a depressing thing to have laid bare. It's a good thing, obviously, that marriage equality has been passed in Australia, but just knowing that 40%, that's a much higher number than anyone should reasonably be comfortable with. Frankly, 1% would be too much, but friggin' nearly 40%, that's depressing. So the next patron, David Kopka, says, I would like to give a shout out to Home Alone and The Nightmare Before Christmas. I also recently watched Love Actually and loved its fun, wholesome spirit. Would you consider Shane Black movies such as Iron Man 3 or Lethal Weapon to be Christmas movies? Addressing the first point, yes, Home Alone and Nightmare Before Christmas, those are great Christmas films. Nightmare Before Christmas is a particular favourite of mine and my fiance's, and another favourite of my fiance's is Love Actually. She actually watched it the other day. I think it was recently put on Netflix as well. But yeah, Love Actually for her is Christmas viewing. I think it's a pretty good film. I think it is kind of trying to be the kitchen sink of romance films and romantic comedies, where if any of these love stories that it portrays were just like one film, it probably wouldn't be that interesting. But putting them all together and making every single love story, except for a same-sex love story, because it's only 2003. If you have all of these love stories, then being able to break them up and kind of link them with a theme or link them with certain characters makes things a bit more interesting. So for those of you who don't know, Love Actually is a really successful romance film from 2003. You've got this overarching narrative of Bill Nighy as a rock star who's trying to have a Christmas #1 record. You've got Keira Knightley getting married to Chiwetel Ejiofor, and the wedding videographer played by Andrew Lincoln is actually in love with Keira Knightley. You've got Colin Firth, who falls in love with this Portuguese housekeeper played by Lucia Monet. Because I think the thing about Colin Firth, by the way, it was 2003, and then 11 years later, when he's in Kingsman: The Secret Service, that man got better with age. I'm not gay, but my God, that man got better with age. You have Alan Rickman, who is in a relationship with Emma Thompson, and who is tempted by a secretary at work, played by Heikki Makasht. No idea if I've pronounced that name. You've got Hugh Grant as the recently elected Prime Minister, and a new member of the 10 Downing Street staff, played by Martine McCutcheon, and he has an altercation with the US President, played by Billy Bob Thornton. And my God, did that subplot with Billy Bob Thornton become increasingly relevant with the rise of Donald Trump. You've got Liam Neeson, who has recently lost his wife, and that's once again got depressingly relevant, who's trying to raise a stepson who is in love with a girl at school. You've got one of the funniest ones is you've got Chris Marshall playing this geeky British dude who decides to go to America in order to try and meet beautiful American ladies who will fall for his accent. You've got Martin Freeman and Joanna Page who are playing body doubles in porn, in a sex scene or a porn film or something, who start having a relationship that's really funny and charming. You've got Rowan Atkinson, who was meant to be like a guardian angel, but his apparently a lot of his segments were cut out from the finished film. It is a lot of stories. And some of them are really good, some are better than others, I think, but what kind of elevates it is the performances. I think Liam Neeson is really good in the film. I think that there's so many cast members, I'm kind of losing track here. Emma Thompson, her subplot with Alan Rickman is just heartbreaking stuff. Like the performance she gives is just out of this world brilliant, and also Craig Armstrong's music, particularly the Portuguese love theme, is one of his best pieces. I think Craig Armstrong, he's absolutely one of my favourite composers ever. He did The Incredible Hulk. He did the orchestrations for Moulin Rouge. He's an amazing composer who desperately needs more work. I think he's just amazing at what he does, and Love Actually is probably his most accessible, or at least his mainstream recognisable work. But going to David Kopka's other comments, would you consider Shane Black movies such as Iron Man 3 Lethal Weapon to be Christmas movies? I absolutely would, yeah. Shane Black, correct me if I'm wrong, does he set all of his directed films at Christmas? I know that Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is set at Christmas. The Nice Guys is set at Christmas. His upcoming The Predator film will probably also be set at Christmas, but I don't think that's been 100% confirmed yet. But just a Predator film at Christmas just sounds like so much fun to me, and that trailer is going to be so much fun. Iron Man 3 is also set at Christmas, but it is easily his least Christmassy film, where it's definitely just a backdrop, whereas the Christmas aspects are much more front and center in his films. So I don't know if I'd consider Iron Man 3 a Christmas film. Like, it depends on what your definition of a Christmas film is. If it's set at Christmas, does that automatically make it a Christmas film? But for example, with Die Hard, you do have Christmas songs throughout it. You have the Nakatomi Plaza has Christmas decorations. That film, even though it's not like all about holiday cheer and about Christmas themes, is set at Christmas, and the Christmas aesthetic and the style is present throughout most of the film. So you can make that argument. Iron Man 3, definitely less so. So, I don't know about Iron Man 3, but the rest of his filmography, the ones that he's directed, I would say that those arguably are Christmas films. In my opinion, at least. It's all down to your own subjective opinion. And the final patron is Edward Sweet, who says, my top 5 underrated Christmas films: Batman Returns, Love Actually, Jingle All the Way, Krampus, and Arthur Christmas. That's a very good list. I'd also argue that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone has the atmosphere of a Christmas movie and should therefore count as one. Yeah, that's a similar argument to what I was just saying with Die Hard. Even though Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is not fully set at Christmas, a big chunk of it does take place at Christmas. There's a scene where Hagrid has to drag the massive Christmas tree to the Great Hall. There's the snow, there's the fireplace, there's the Christmas jumpers they get. A big portion of that film and a lot of its iconography does come from the Christmas setting. So I'd argue that even if it's not explicitly a Christmas film, it is something you can watch at Christmas and get that Christmas spirit. He says it's very warm, nostalgic, and whimsical right down to the colour palette. Others I haven't seen but have been recommended: Silent Night, Deadly Night, Bad Santa, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, another Shane Black film, and Rare Exports. So that's an interesting list for you to possibly check out. But I think the most interesting Christmas film you've put in your top 5 underrated is Batman Returns. That is technically set at Christmas. I've not seen Batman Returns for years, though, so I can't quite attest to whether or not it is properly, truly a Christmas film. But also with Jingle All the Way is a film that is, I think objectively, is not that good, but it is a great satire at just the commercialism of Christmas, and just how, like, the collective insanity that can come from trying to get the hottest new toy, and the frustration that every adult or every parent has trying to get the perfect present for their kid. It is such an amalgamation of chaos and craziness that I just can't help but admire it. And if Arnold Schwarzenegger was not the lead of that film, I don't know if it would work, but he is on the level with that film, and that is, in my opinion, why it works as well as it does. So if you would like to become a patron of the Film Brits podcast, then please consider going to www.patreon.com/Trilbee, and let's also thank our sponsors, T-Blocks, who, if you use the coupon code TRILBEETBX, TRILBEETBX at checkout, you can get 10% off your order. Basically, they are a t-shirt subscription service for geek-related t-shirts. It's kind of like a Loot Crate, but if you just want a t-shirt, and if you want a t-shirt of your selected chosen theme, so with Loot Crate, you do not pick the theme every month. A theme is picked for you. So, for example, you could pay $10-15 for a Loot Crate based on swords and sandals thrillers or Game of Thrones style stuff, and you're not into Game of Thrones, that's not your thing, like you've got a box of stuff that you probably won't appreciate or enjoy. Whereas with T-Blocks, when you sign up, you say, I'm into DC Comics, I'm into Doctor Who, I'm into Rick and Morty, Back to the Future, science fiction. They have some pre-selected categories that you can select, and you can also you can actually list them yourself. You can type them in your own words and say what you are into, and then T-Blocks every month will send you a t-shirt based on the themes that you select. It's not a gamble. You tell them what you want, and if you're sent a shirt and you don't like the shirt, you can send it back and they will send you another one free of charge. You go onto T-Blocks, they'll send you something related to Rick and Morty, and it's got Mr. Poopy Butthole on it, but you don't like Mr. Poopy Butthole, so you go to T-Blocks and say, I don't want a Mr. Poopy Butthole shirt. You can send it back, they'll send you another shirt, and even if it's the wrong size, they'll send you it as well. So be sure to go sign up for T-Blocks, where you can get t-shirts for $6.99 a month, or you can also go onto the checkout and type in Trilbee TBX for 10% off your order. So if you do that, you will be supporting the podcast as well. So thank you so much to all my patrons. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in a couple of days in regards to answering Twitter or Facebook related comments. But now, before my throat gives out, I'm going to drink an entire bottle of Malibu, hope that my throat gets better, and I will start immediately recording the listener question portion of the podcast. So have a very Merry Christmas, and I shall speak to you very soon. Take care, everyone.